Good morning, students. What we have seen till now is in this new chapter that we have started, Beliefs and Buildings and Thinkers, is about how once the man, the early man who started his journey as a hunter, gatherer, pastoralist, farmer, and then gradually he started living in towns and cities, and then he had a far more sedentary life, and then he started wondering about, not thinking about just, but wondering about the greater questions of life, that is the age old questions, and no one has those answers even today. And the interesting thing is, even today we have those same questions in our minds. And we also saw that how the world was, not just the Indian subcontinent, how world was very uniquely thinking about the same questions, and the same questions were bothering different civilizations at that point in time, which was between 600 years before the birth of Christ and after, that is 600 AD. So the whole 600 BC to 600 AD. I'm sorry, guys, 600 BC and 600 years before Christ, both are different things. 600 BC would mean 400 years before Christ. I'm sorry about it. Okay, so students, that is what it was. And in India, whether you talk about Bhagwan Mahavir, Gautam Buddha, and the great Brahmin scholars, to China, where Confucius was racking his heads and kind of coming up with amazing solutions and questions, and then Lao Tse in Japan, then Zoroaster in Iran, then people like Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, all these people around the world were just banging their heads and coming up with amazing questions with amazing solutions. Of course, those solutions, none of us have ever been satisfied completely with those solutions, because all of us have a different take to life. We all have different experiences, we all have different perceptions. So those questions are bothering even the modern man today, and we even today we look for different answers for the same questions. Okay, so now coming today with about uh, the sacrificial tradition. Okay, we saw that yesterday as well. The new questions, many ideas found in the Upanishads, that is 6th century BC onwards, show that people were curious about the meaning of life, the possibility of life after death, and rebirth. Was rebirth due to past actions? Such issues were hotly debated. Thinkers were concerned with understanding and expressing the nature of the ultimate reality, and others outside the Vedic tradition asked whether or not there even was a single ultimate reality. People also began speculating on the significance of sacrificial traditions. So, students, you have to understand a lot of things. I wish actually we were in class and I could have shown certain things to you on board, but I'll try and keep it crisp and precise here. Students, you have to understand that any civilization that starts its journey through nature worship, and incidentally, all the civilizations on this planet, they started their journey with basically nature worship. And as I have said in my previous one of my previous video, it could have been someone people, a tribe or a group of people living in the mountains. For them, that mountain would be the mountain god, right? Some living on the river banks, probably who were into farming, for them it is that particular river. It could be in India, it could be Ganga Maya, it could be Yamuna Ji, it could be Narmada Mata, it could be anything for that matter, a river which was considered to be extremely important. So the forces of nature, and even if you go to the Inca civilization, or Incas, the Aztecs, all of them gave enormous amount of importance and significance. Even, guys, the ancient Egyptian civilization, where the sun god was considered to be the most powerful and the important god for them. So, guys, you have to understand. And of course, they used to pray River Nile. So you have to understand. And all of them, guys, all the civilizations were about sacrifices, because they always felt that yes, for throughout the year we take so much from our gods, that is the nature gods, right? We take so much from our gods, so once a year or twice a year they would feel kind of a sense of an obligation to give something back in return to those gods and goddesses for whom you, or rather on whom you depend for your existence, and your forefathers have been depending on your existence, and you pray to those gods that, the way those rivers or the mountains have been taking care of them and their forefathers, they would like the same uh, caring for their, even for their children and their children's children. So guys, that is how it used to be. And so once a year or twice a year, of course, they would sacrifice animals, and they would have elaborate rituals to essentially try and please those nature gods. And then gradually, of course, the gods became and started taking human form, and then they started sacrificing to the gods, which definitely, and again in different cultures, whether you talk about Latin America, you talk about China, you talk about India, that is Indian subcontinent, everywhere it started taking the Greek civilization, of course, the Romans, everywhere it started taking a very, very human form. uh, that is what it is about. And so, but after 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years, students, when we started living a stationary life, when we had evolved, when now agriculture was not the only source of livelihood, right? People started doing and indulging in so many different activities which did not depend on nature, but those traditions, the age old traditions, they continued, of that is of offering sacrifices, that is animal sacrifices. And naturally that thing continued in India, an Indian subcontinent at that point in time, in fact in many areas, but definitely it has come down significantly. It exists even today in certain temples. So that is sacrificing of animals. But in those years, that is, we are talking about 2000 years ago, it was literally rampant, or probably every temple would be having, in India or in any part of the world for that matter, a system of sacrificing animals. And now, naturally, students, as people evolved, they started questioning these practices. Okay, why should the animals be butchered? Why should the animals be killed for no fault of theirs? And things about rebirth, and then because that we've had a tradition, and we even today, Hinduism's one of the very, very strong belief system is that, you ultimately, everything and every soul goes to and embraces the supreme father from where everything came out of, and the whole journey from this janma to that janma, from this life to that life, is about getting rid of your past karmas and the wrong karmas, and making yourself so pure, and after many, many births and rebirths and deaths, that finally you go and embrace and you mix with that super energy, or that supreme father, whatever you choose to call it. So so these questions were, they definitely could be considered very abstract questions, but then with abstract solutions, of course. But then these were the questions which had started bothering a great section of people, and at the same time, a great section of people got attracted to these questions. Of course, the bhikshus and the brahmins were working about it, but not that the people who were living normal life like me and you, as farmers or soldiers or traders or whatever, that we were completely inert to or uninterested about these questions. No, we were also being bothered by those questions, and we used to look up to those great masters, and we used to consider them learned men who could actually give answers to our queries and questions. So, debates and discussions. We get a glimpse of lively discussions and debates from Buddhist texts, which mention as many as 64 sects or school of thought. That is Buddhist school of thought, of course. Teachers travel from one place to another, trying to convince one another as well as laypersons about the validity of their philosophy or the way they understood the world. Not always trying to convert you students, mind you, because let us today it would be considered that you are probably trying to convert someone into your religion or faith system. No, guys, you have to understand that in those years it used to be the favorite pastime. People used to discuss so many things. Guys, I'll tell you one very interesting thing. When I was in, that is many years ago, once I was in one of the villages in Karnataka, and someone told me that we were sitting a lot of people, and someone told me that he was quite an old gentleman, and he said, when we were young and when we used to come here, and used to sit with our friends and under a tree or on top of the mountains, we used to have challenges. We used to debate, whether it would rain, and someone would say, after how many days would it rain, and someone would argue, no, it would not rain, and what if it did, and then we would argue in which part of the village would it rain and which part of the village it would not. Guys, do we discuss those issues today? No one cares, right? So you have to understand that these were the things which used to bother people of previous generations. So 2000 years ago, naturally, students, right, if probably 90 or 80 or 70 years ago, people were fighting whether it would rain, it would not rain, how much would it rain, and all those kind of things, just observing the world around them. So that's what essentially it means, that everyone is observing the world around them. So, guys, this is what it was about. And that is why when people used to debate and argue, it was not just about that they were trying to convert you, or they were trying to convert your faith system into theirs. Not at all. Okay, now debates took place in the Kutagrahashala, literally a hut with a pointed roof, or in grooves where traveling mendicants halted. Guys, what is a mendicant? Guys, mendicants are essentially people who beg, but then beg is an English word, but that does not, students, mean a beggar. Guys, a beggar is something else. They do not have the right word for it. A beggar is something else and someone else. जो दिन भर भीख ही मांगता है, उसकी दिनचर्या शुरू होती है भीख मांगने से और अंत होती है भीख मांगने से. He can't do any good job without, other than begging. But a mendicant is someone else. Guys, you have to understand that in those times, the Brahmins, the bhikshus, all of them used to go with a bowl to get to attract to collect, I'm sorry, to collect food grains, right, for themselves, for their colleagues. Even if they were associated with some ashram, then it would be for the people in the ashram, right? So, guys, that was a part of their learning. Even Sri Ram did it in spite of being, Arjuna did it, Yudhishthira did it in spite of being, Rajkumar and sons of emperors and kings, but even they did it, right? So, technically, it is begging. That is, but then is it begging? Can they be called beggars? No, because it is a part of their journey, their spiritual journey, right? So, mendicant, of course, people who depend on others for their own needs, but beggars, clearly not. Okay, so these would be people who would, as per their spiritual growth and spiritual development and spiritual journey, they would be asking for the food items, and they would depend on the clothes which were given by others rather than they going. And if, it could be a tattered cloth, and it would go, and as long as someone doesn't give another one, they would keep wearing the same old cloth. So, students, that is what in pure sense it is. So you really can't call them beggars. So, students, we shall continue tomorrow. Thank you.